Well, good morning, and I'm joining you here from Port Alberni on the unceded lands of the Sishat and Hupacheset people. I want to thank everybody for joining today's press conference. As we know, it's been a year since COVID-19 hit our country and impacted small businesses from every sector, which have struggled throughout the first and second waves of this pandemic. Some have pivoted their operations and taken on massive debts or even closed their doors permanently. It's new businesses that have been left completely out of supports. Existing government programs like the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy or the Canada Emergency Business Account or the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, they haven't been able to access that because they don't meet the year-over-year revenue loss requirements or haven't filed a 2019 tax return. And that no exceptions rule has been made, has deeply impacted these small businesses and is completely unacceptable. Right now, we know that according to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, they estimate that small businesses have accumulated $135 billion in debt and haven't been able to access these programs. And the Liberals keep claiming their success, how they stepped up for small business. They acknowledge that there's been a gap when it comes to startups. They keep saying that they know there's a problem, that they're looking at it. Well, it's been a year and small businesses haven't been getting the help that they need. Big corporations are still getting the support from the government, but right now we're at risk of losing a generation of businesses, startups that, right now are in every community across this country in every riding. So we need to fix it. And we've been bringing recommendations to the government to improve access to the wage subsidy, to the emergency business account loan program, to the rent program, and create special exemptions for these small businesses so they can access the same benefits as any other small business in the country. And there's many ways they can do that, whether it be comparing revenue from a qualifying period to qualifying period, or demonstrating the impact that the pandemic has had on projected revenue streams, or looking at industry standards. These are things that the government can do to help support these businesses. The government can't abandon these small businesses, and they need to come up with some measurements and help them now. Time is of the essence, and we're going to continue as New Democrats to put pressure on the government to help support these small businesses that are in every community across our country and in every riding. So it's an honor and privilege for me to turn it over to our finance critic and our House Leader, Peter Julian.
Thanks so much, Gord. And Gord Johns, of course, as our small business critic, has been the strongest advocate for small businesses in the House of Commons during this pandemic. I'm speaking to you from the city of New Westminster on the traditional unceded territories of the Kakite First Nation and the Coast Salish peoples, and wanted to mention that the refusal to provide support for startup businesses in this country during the pandemic contrast vividly with the $750 billion in liquidity supports given to the banking sector and to supports given to larger businesses that have often gone for dividends, for executive bonuses, and for stock buybacks. Alors, on voit aujourd'hui que les entreprises en démarrage ont été laissées à côté par le gouvernement Trudeau. Là, depuis le début de la pandémie, l'MPD, Gord Johns, Jagmeet Singh, et l'ensemble du caucus ont demandé qu'effectivement, on mette en place des mesures aussi qui vont aider les entreprises en démarrage. Mais tous les programmes qui ont été mis en place, qu'on parle des prêts pour les petits commerces, qu'on parle de l'aide pour le loyer pour les petits commerçants, tous ces programmes-là excluent les entreprises en démarrage. Aujourd'hui, on va entendre deux gens d'affaires qui ont effectivement démarré leur entreprise pendant la pandémie. On va voir effectivement comment leurs employés et leur commerce ont subi les conséquences du refus du gouvernement de mettre en place une aide pour les entreprises en démarrage. Puis, on a proposé plusieurs possibilités, plusieurs façons de faire en sorte que les entreprises en démarrage soient aidées aussi. Jusqu'à maintenant, le gouvernement continue de refuser d'apporter cette aide-là. Alors aujourd'hui, on réitère notre demande au gouvernement de mettre en considération aussi les entreprises en démarrage parce que ça va être extrêmement important pour la relance économique qui devrait nécessairement suivre la pandémie qu'on est en train de vivre. Merci.
So I would just ask Scarlet Osborne, pass it over to you.
Good morning. My name is Scarlet Osborne, and I am the proud owner of a restaurant in Sechelt, BC called El Segundo. El Segundo was conceptualized in early 2019, and at that point, we legally and financially committed ourselves with a 20-year lease and $400,000 worth of investment. All of that commitment was, we couldn't turn back when the pandemic hit, and so we had to carry on with our renovations, our construction, and opening our business. We were due to open the restaurant in April of 2020, and in the end, it was late July of 2020 when we finally opened our doors. We were really fortunate to have a wonderful summer. We were really excited with how well our product was received. The restaurant operates really well and demonstrated viability and profitability despite being at half capacity like all of our peers. Unfortunately, our lack of eligibility to any of the support structures became catastrophic as we moved into the fall months. At that point, we lost a huge amount of our weekly revenue, not only due to capacity issues, but because of the social restrictions put in place due to the pandemic. And it was at this point that it really hit home that our inability to access the same programs as our next door neighbors and other restaurants in our community was going to be impacting my business partner and I directly. Since November, we have been subsidizing our payroll out of our own pockets every single week in order to keep people employed. And in the summer, we had 35 employees, and that got whittled down to 19, which was a terrible process of having to make the worst kinds of decisions. And without the support, there was a limit to how much we could continue to subsidize that payroll. Fortunately, our wonderful staff have done everything they can to reduce our costs. And but ultimately, this winter cost my business partner and I $100,000 of our own money. Money which 100% of it was spent on payroll plus some, meaning that had we had access to the wage subsidies that we would likely be closer to breaking even. So it was a completely, in my mind, as we were just as committed as every other restaurant or anyone else in hospitality prior to the pandemic. We were in the same boat, but with none of the same supports. And in my mind, really good governance requires creating an equitable playing field for small business in particular. And in this case, we feel like we've really been let down. I'll pass it on to Socrates Diamant now.
Hi, yes, my name is Socrates Diamant. I am in Victoria, BC. And I opened a restaurant called The Vicious Poodle. We are actually a new LGBTQ plus venue in downtown Victoria. Much like Scarlet, we were committed by July of 2019 and began renovations in September. And we're also slated to open April 1st. Of course, when one gets to that point, one's ready for revenue. And so even those 2 extra months of being closed, because we finally opened in June, increased the amount of money that it cost just to set the restaurant up. Once we opened, we had a staff of 20, plus local queer and drag performers. As an LGBTQ plus venue, all of my staff are marginalized individuals that have a difficult time finding respectful employment just being who they are. My sous chef is an Indigenous gay man. I had a trans lady working in the kitchen. I had a trans man behind the bar out front. We also had a great summer, able to demonstrate that it is a profitable business model, but also as the restrictions tightened, it became much more difficult and we had to whittle down our staff as well. So from 20 people plus performers, we are now at 7 people. I think with wage subsidies, not only would we have lost less money, I could have kept more people on the payroll. And so that it's heartbreaking to have a great team and have to let them go one by one. Also agreeing with Scarlet, it's very difficult to watch all the businesses around me who are doing exactly the same thing that I'm doing having wage subsidies and rent subsidies, while for us also we have been paying out of pocket since early November, and you know, we're really looking forward to hopefully getting some of the help that everybody else around us is getting, so that we too can continue to remain viable and create jobs for people.
Thank you very much, Socrates. At this time, I will open things up for questions. If you do have a question, I would ask that you use the raise hand function. And please, when you're identified, just say your name and your media. S'il y a des questions, je vous demande d'utiliser la fonction lever la main. Et s'il vous plaît, veuillez identifier votre nom et aussi votre média. So I see we have a question from Carl Meyer. Please go ahead, Carl.
Hi, yeah, thanks. It's Carl Meyer, National Observer. Thanks so much to everybody for putting this together. To Socrates and to Scarlet, I wonder if you could both describe, have you brought these concerns to government, to CRA, to another department, and what was the reaction? What was the discussion?
I can start with that. Absolutely, I have made as much noise as I possibly can right from the outset of understanding the impact in November. Initially, it was with a lot of optimism. I would phone the CRA and I would say, well, clearly you can see that you've made a mistake. And, you know, I kept asking to be put through to someone's manager, and then just came to a hard no. There was absolutely no system for appealing the wage subsidy. And I heard that over and over again. There's no avenue to appeal this. You don't qualify, that's it. And so as a result of that, I started just phoning anyone who would listen, and eventually actually through this process ended up finding about 25 different restaurants just here in sort of Vancouver, Victoria, Nanaimo, Lower Mainland. And we created a group of us actually that started lobbying a little bit more heavily. We've recently set up a website called savestartups.ca, and we're encouraging any businesses across Canada of any industry to register their business with us, because we want to make our voices louder and more heard, and have people understand that this isn't an isolated problem. And in addition, actually, Patrick Weiler, who is my MP in Sechelt, recently tabled a petition that I asked him to put forward, asking the government to change the eligibility criteria and calculation criteria for the wage and rent subsidies. But now that's been tabled, we still have a 45-day wait, and you know, no guaranteed outcomes. So.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah, my experience has been similar. Scouring the websites every time that they're announced that there's a new new criteria, seeing that I don't fit. I have called the CRA as well a number of times, and much like Scarlet, same thing. You know, they look it over and they say, "Yeah, you don't qualify. Thank you very much for calling." I wrote to my MP, Laurel Collins, who introduced me to this group here in Scarlet. And it's nice to finally be part of a group and be able to feel a little bit less isolated. And like, there is a group of us now, our voices can be heard. I'm not alone in this, and hopefully we can make some change.
Okay, thank you.
Carl, did you have a follow-up?
No, that's good, thanks.
Okay, and now Cormac. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, my question is a bit off topic, so I apologize for that. But this question would be for either Mr. Julian or Mr. Johns. Just on vaccinations for Canadians, the European Union this morning is once again talking about restrictions on exports for vaccines. And of course, you know, our Pfizer and Moderna doses which we're going to heavily rely on in the weeks ahead to ramp up vaccination efforts, are produced in Europe. Are you concerned about the latest talk from the EU about once again bringing in export controls to try and restrict vaccines heading out to countries outside of the EU?
Thanks for your question, Cormac. Of course, that's better directed to Don Davies, our health critic, but I can say that we are concerned about how slow the government has actually been on reacting on vaccines. Canada is trailing all of our major industrialized partners around the world, and so we have been putting pressure on the government to actually put in place a plan that is much more effective. So Canada is behind, certainly behind the United States, certainly behind our major partners. That's a major concern. But in terms of the vaccination details, it's much better to address that question to Don Davies.
Thanks. I just on vaccines again, just to see if I can get comment from you, and I will reach out to Mr. Davies as well. But you know, you're expressing concern about Canada's place in the world in terms of vaccination rates. President Biden has said he's willing to open up his borders to vaccines once May hits, and they've vaccinated a majority of their population. Today, a U.S. official tells Bloomberg that Canada and Mexico will be at the top of the list. Are you hopeful that the U.S. can fill in the gap where Canada has been slow in terms of vaccinations?
I think that's a question better directed to Don Davies again. But from the very beginning, we have set out that there should be domestic production of vaccines, and so part of our concern has been the lack of detail around the contracts that the government signed, but also the fact that we haven't put into place the domestic vaccine production that's so important. But I think the details on this, I know that Alana would be more than happy to put you in touch with Don Davies. And so we can get comment from Don to you, I think, very quickly after this press conference.
Absolutely, I would be happy to do that. Are there any other questions at this time? Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions?
Yeah, I have another question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Just to Peter and Gord, just to be clear, what would you be looking for for a solution for Scarlet and Socrates? Can the Minister of National Revenue just simply order the CRA to change the revenue loss requirements, or is it more complex?
Yeah, maybe I'll take this. Well, first, you know, you heard from Scarlet and you heard from Socrates. These new businesses, their employees, they can't be abandoned through this pandemic. We must make every effort to ensure that corporate giants don't take over the backbone of our local economies. They're worried. They're worried about how they're going to pay their lease, how they're going to meet payroll, how they're going to survive this pandemic. And you heard about them accumulating debt without getting any help. Now, there is simple, just measurements they can make, but we know the government has, experts in each of their departments that can come up with, criteria that can help support these small businesses. They say that they're there for small business all along. They understand there's a problem, yet they haven't delivered, and time's running out. We know that at the end of the month, the CEBA loan application process closes, for example. They can't wait. They need help now. And there is simple things that they can look at, comparing revenue from one qualifying period to another, or demonstrating that the impact has impacted their revenue streams that they projected through looking at industry standards, demonstrating that they've been operating at a loss, or that they've paid receipts. They've got leases in place. They've been paying employees all along. So there's many different tools of the government, but this is these are simple things that we're bringing forward that the government can look at, but they haven't made an effort, clearly, because they're still abandoning these small businesses. It's been a year, and this is not fair to these small business owners that, really are the unsung heroes of this pandemic. They closed their doors for public health and did the right thing. and now they're being penalized, and they put their life savings into these businesses to get them up and running. It's unacceptable. The government needs to act immediately.
Do we have any other questions at this time? Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. So this is the end of the press conference. Ceci met fin aux conférences de presse.